here on VSIN, the Sports Betting Network.
Cashing Out continues through the night right here on VSIN, the Sports Betting Network, with me, Joe Ceraulo. And we're going to take it shortly back to that progressive guest line of ours. I can't wait for this spot. But before we do that, I want to remind you all, get involved. Get your voice heard on social media at the Joe Ceraulo. Follow me on Twitter at VSIN Live. Follow the network on Twitter, because we've got a daily poll question of the day. We'll have results tomorrow for tomorrow night's episode of Cashing Out. But the poll is up, the poll is live, and I want your take. How do you prefer to watch Monday Night Football? Do you prefer the regular traditional broadcasts with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman? Or do you prefer the new and incredibly successful Manning cast with Eli and Peyton on ESPN2 usually when they do air it? I want to hear from you guys. Tweet at me, tweet at the show, and you will be heard. This guy tweeted at me with regards to this question. Let's take it to the progressive guest line. Welcome in my guy, fantasy football expert, Tony Cutillo. Tony, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Just be careful with that expert word, man. That's a big bill to live up to, Joe, so I'm going to try.
You gave out some winners on the show last week, Tony. Before we get to your winners, to your waiver wire watch list for this week, how do you answer that question? How do you prefer to watch Monday Night Football, my man?
Listen, no disrespect to the Manning boys. I think they do a tremendous job, but I'm an old soul, man. Like, I honestly just like to watch the game. I don't even like to listen to announcers. I like to watch it, pick it apart. I have a notebook next to me. I take my notes. And then I kind of watch some highlights afterwards, too. So I call me an old soul, but I'd rather the traditional broadcast.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught that little eye roll of mine. Checks out. A Philly guy who doesn't want to watch Eli Manning talk about football for 3.5 hours. All right. I mean, come on.
No, that's an easy, dude. That's hanging fruit, man. Right there.
I love it. Tony, let's go position by position here. The waiver wire opens up any minute now over on the East Coast. Who should we be targeting? I think you and I are thinking alike in terms of quarterbacks on the watch list. Who are you eyeing?
Oh, it's got to be my boy Baker, man. I got to say my boy because I've been on Baker. I know we talked off air. I know you like Baker. And listen, and this is no disrespect to anybody else, but Baker Mayfield got paid, deservingly so. And he just looks so comfortable. You could be an expert all you want and go by statistics, and you could go by analytics, but just pass the eye test. Baker looks like he's home. And finally, Joe, somebody bought into him. Somebody invested into him. And sometimes the psychological factor is more than the physical factor. And he just looks on point and efficient, man.
Yeah, he looked fantastic. I mean, and this goes, beyond just week one, obviously. You mentioned efficient, 24 of 30 against the Commanders for 290 and 4 touchdowns. But this continues, his last 6-7 games last season. He was lights out in his 2 playoff games. Even the one that they lost in Detroit, he was fantastic. He was strong as hell to finish the season. I mean, it shocks me that he's, so widely available in so many leagues. He's got a great team of targets he's throwing to over there, man. You and I are all in right now on Baker Mayfield. Now, let's take it to the ground game a little bit. Jordan Mason's the sexy, popular name after that Monday night primetime breakout performance. Is he your top option on the ground, or are you going to look elsewhere here and maybe surprise a few people?
I'm going to be honest with you. When I do these things, Joe, I'm just hypothetically feeling that people should probably already have Mason on a roster. So if they don't, right? I mean, obviously he's the guy, but you got to be careful, man. He actually muddied the waters more than he helped them, because now you have another guy that can handle the rock out there in San Francisco. And with Christian McCaffrey, that just might make my man, Mr. You do it all, just take a step back a little bit. And Kyle Shanahan say, look, we could throw Mason in there. So I'm going to go to Vegas. And I love Alexander Madison. I drafted him in a lot of my leagues. Listen, Zamir White did nothing sexy in that game. Also, remember, who is his quarterback? It is Gardner Minshew. He's got no arm. He's got a noodle with an arm. So what does he do? He throws out to the flat. He throws the screens. And that guy is Alexander Madison. You got to pepper this stat, man. So I like Madison a lot, and I love Bucky Irvin for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, you and me both on Bucky Irving. I think Rachaad White is definitely effective in the passing game, but last year I think a lot of his success on the ground came because he had no competition. he was their only option. And he wasn't efficient. We talk about Baker being efficient. Rachaad White was not efficient. He was not a 4.5 yards per carry guy. He was closer to a 3.5 yards per carry guy who just got a lot of carries. I'm with you, man. I think Bucky Irving is going to get the bulk of the carries as the season progresses here. White might be used more in pass protection and in running routes. You think Bucky Irving has a shot to be RB1 for Tampa Bay by maybe, I don't know, I'll rush it. I'll say the halfway point.
I do, man. I really do. And a lot of it's coach speak. If you listen to Todd Bowles, before the kickoff in the first game, the first thing he said when asked by reporters was, he didn't give a definitive answer. All he said was, well, we're going to ride Rachaad because he was the hot hand last year. He didn't say Rashaad's our guy. And if you see 15 carries for 31 yards, and you see Bucky Irving averaging almost 6 yards per carry, it almost looks like the Von A-chain of last year. So I am telling you, I'm all in on Bucky Irving. I think it's exactly what you said. It's going to be a role reversal. Irvin will be the first and second down guy, and Rachaad White will be the passing guy on the third down.
I love it. Tony, you're a smart guy, so whenever you and I are in agreement, I feel good about that. Let's talk about some pass catchers here. Who do you think might be available? Who are you looking towards in terms of receivers, tight ends, maybe even? What else do you like on this waiver wire tonight?
I'm going to pat myself on the back here like I always do, man. It is what it is. If Rashad Shaheed is on your waiver wires, then I got to be in your league because I was hyping up Rashid Shaheed all offseason. This guy is a wide receiver 3 breakout. He's a wide receiver 2, and he could put up monster numbers. If you watch the Saints, he was in the backfield. He was being that X, the Y to Z. He was all over the field. They love this kid, and he's just going to continue to burn coverages. So obviously, to me, he's number one, but he's not on my waiver wire. One guy I think, Joe, who is an absolute gem is Greg Dortch. It's not a household name. It's not sexy, but this guy was buried over the last 2 years behind guys like Rondell Moore and Hollywood Brown. He is the prototypical do-everything receiver. And as you've seen it, Kyler Murray locked in on him all day long. Marvin Harrison Jr. ran a wrong route. He dropped a couple passes. He got in the doghouse early. Greg Dortch is a guy, a PPR monster. So you have to get on him right now. I'm telling you, he could be a top 25 receiver by the end of the year, and you're going to get him in week 2.
Wow, top 25. I mean, that's high
bold
praise. I do worry a little bit from a durability standpoint and perspective at 5'7", $170, and that $170 might be a little generous if you look at the kid. I'd love him to have a great year. I want him to be successful. I just worry slightly about his frame in this league. Yeah, Michael Wilson was a popular name. Speaking of Arizona receivers, he was the sleeper pick, right? I heard so many people on so many outlets talking about Michael Wilson coming into this year, and I don't want to overreact week 1, but when you look at Michael Wilson, 1 reception on 2 targets. You look at Marvin Harrison, 1 reception on 3 targets. Arizona's top 2 receivers had 2 combined receptions. How concerning is that to you after week 1?
Very concerning, man. And honestly, because and people I think make this mistake a lot. They go with that big and sexy name, right? Everybody was in on Harrison. Everybody was on Michael Wilson because he's a big guy, big frame. I mean, listen, indirectly, you just did it a couple minutes ago, right? You're worried about durability with Greg Dortch, but we've watched guys in the past like a John Brown who's really excelled at a very small frame. You're looking at a guy like Khalil Shakir in Buffalo that can really excel with a small frame. And again, listen, there was guys like Azir Hakeem a long time ago with the greatest show on turf. So I look at this guy, and Joe, I'm going to say this, last year, he won me a lot of money because I put him in as a DFS darling, anytime touchdown bets, and he just exploded. So I think he definitely has the durability to be able to at least give you 60, 70 catches, and that's waiver wire great gem material right there.
Hey, I hope it works out, man. It would be a great story. And the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray. Hey, maybe there's a little short king magic for the Cardinals, the Kyler to Dortch connection. Hey, Tony, final minute or so here. Isaiah Likely, what's your read on him? I mean, it kind of surprises me today. I wasn't prepared to see how many leagues Isaiah Likely would be available in because this is a kid who I was so confident in. I took his over 1.5 receptions the second I saw how insultingly low that number was. What's your read on him? Is he going to be in almost every league by the end of this week?
Oh, he has to be. He has to be. And I am not the guy who's going to tell you he's going to take over for Mark Andrews. But what is very interesting and telling is he was the guy that Lamar looked for in the entire game. Third downs, when he needed a first down. Isaiah Likely was that guy. It wasn't Mark Andrews. It wasn't Zay Flowers. It wasn't Rashad Bateman. It was 100% Isaiah Likely. So I know a lot of it was game script. The Chiefs, Spagnuolo is a tremendous defensive coordinator. He takes the best players away. But what he was able to do athletically and the vision of Lamar to him, you cannot overlook it. So, yeah, he has to be in on every team right now.
Yeah, and this was not fluky, folks. I mean, take week 1 out of the equation. Look at how Isaiah Likely finished the season last year down the stretch. Had 6 touchdowns in Baltimore's final 7 games. Lamar Jackson loves his tight ends. The more the merrier. He doesn't just need Mark Andrews out there. More Tony after the break. That means the show will be more merrier. Cashing Out with me, Joe Ceraulo, rolls on after this.
Here on VSIN, the Sports Betting Network.
Cashing Out continues with me, Joe Ceraulo, right here on VSIN, and we're so lucky to be joined by my guy, fantasy football expert. You could hear him talking about it on Sirius XM every Sunday night. You could follow him on Twitter at Rise with Tony, my guy Tony Cutillo. And Tony, before we get into your bread and butter, some daily fantasy looks for week 2 in the National Football League. We've got Thursday Night Football just a couple nights away, rapidly creeping up on us, and you've got some interesting bets for this game, one of which I rarely, if ever, dive into this market. You've got a defensive prop. So I want to ask you, what differentiates handicapping defensive props from your more normalized offensive props? How is that process, if at all, different? And then, of course, what do you like on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, the biggest thing about the defensive props is not a lot of people play them. So you can get some really, really good value. Like I'm talking barely. I thought I was going to get this for plus money, but it was close at minus 105. But that's where the value lies, because you can really dive into tackles. I used to be a huge IDP guy in season-long fantasy football, and I would pull names out of a hat because you're always going with, a guy that's either on a bad team, that their defense is going to be on the field a lot, or vice versa, just a really good elite kind of player. And when I looked at this, I look at last year, and I look at the consistency against the team of the opponent. And I look at Kendall Fuller, and last year, he's a defensive back for the Miami Dolphins. We go over 5.5. This is total tackles. I love this number. It's just like rushing and receiving, but for an IDP with tackles plus assists. That's over 5.5 at minus 105. Last year versus Buffalo was his best game. Had 8 total tackles, 3 passes defended, and an interception. And by the way, you hit the over in week 1 already. So this number to me, the way the Buffalo Bills play, this is a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, went for 6 solo plus assists against the Jaguars week 1 there. That's a new one, man. D-backs especially. I feel like, if anything, people would look more so at linebackers when you're looking at tackle props. But going for a corner, hey, why not? I like it, man. So Kendall Fuller, over 5.5 solo tackles plus assists. Pretty good value there, only laying 5 cents. Now flipping it to the offensive side of things. You seem to be pretty Buffalo happy in this one, man. What do you like from the man, the myth, the legend, Josh Allen?
I'll tell you, man. Well, number one, weather could be an issue in this game. I know it's early, and I always say I wish I could be a weatherman because I get paid to be wrong. Right now, it is rain in the forecast. How much? I don't know. But Josh Allen just missed this with 39 yards last week, but he had 9 attempts, almost double-digit attempts. And it just shows me that he has, number one, he's not picked out a number 1 wide receiver yet, and he's just taking the game over by himself. So he shows he still wants to run. And listen, Miami's defense played better than expected, but defensive line gave up chunks of yardage to Tank Bigsby for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So 40 yards to me to get plus money. I think he goes 50 to 60. So you may want to ladder that as well. I think this is going to be a huge Josh Allen rushing night.
Oh, wow. Big on Allen's ground game capabilities in this one. Now, you're not taking the running back for rushing yards, but what do you like at a James Cook coming out of Buffalo's backfield?
Well, because, again, I'm parlaying that, a big rush in the game from Josh Allen. I'm going to back off the Russell with James Cook and go more on the receiving end because, again, there's no defining number one receiver out there in Buffalo. The biggest guy was Keon Coleman at 5 targets last week. There was not a big game by Knox or Cade or Shakir, even Mac Hollins. I know they scored, but not a lot of targets. So he was 3 for 32 last week, which, again, just exactly what he did last year. But the biggest thing is the 100% target to catch ratio. I love that. That just means no matter what's thrown to him, he's going to catch. And last year, doing some digging, his first 5 games, he averaged 28 yards per game. So he's right in that wheelhouse. So that over 18.5 at minus 150. I know it's a little juiced up, but still, I think it's a very attainable bet.
Yeah, man, I've been loving early season running back receiving yard props. I made some money off my former boy, your current boy, Saquon Barkley, to go over 15.5. I said he would do it on his second reception. He did it on his first in Brazil. You mentioned this guy, Keon Coleman. You got one more prop in this game. What do you like from the rookie?
Well, when I do the anytime touchdown props, I try to get as much value as possible. And there's not a ton of value right now. The early numbers, not a ton. I know we hit Isaiah Pacheco last week at plus 105, but that was kind of like that was really low. I think it was low hanging fruit. This one, listen, it's 50-50 shot. But the reason why I like it is Josh Allen showed that he could trust this kid. 4 for 51, like I said earlier. Again, no guy actually evolved as their number one. But here's the thing. He's going to continue to evolve in this game. And again, they just have Jalen Ramsey and nobody else. So I really feel like I can see a back corner of an end zone kind of go up and get a Keon Coleman touchdown at plus 230. I think that's really good value.
Yeah, so I'm curious. You like a bunch of offensive props for Buffalo here in this one. And you mentioned the Dolphins. They got Jalen Ramsey back there, not a whole lot of help. I don't really think that either of these secondaries are scary. I mean, we talked about last week how much Buffalo lost on the defensive side. Maybe most importantly, more so than Trey White leaving, Jordan Poyer leaving, joining these Dolphins, Micah Hyde leaving. Now Matt Milano goes down with the injury. Both of these teams just seem to be really lacking on the defensive side of the ball, Tony. Does that equate to maybe having some interest in the over in this one? I'm curious if you have a lean, have a thought on either side. We're seeing 2s and 2.5s on the board or on a total.
I definitely going to go to over on the total. 100%. I think there's going to be a lot of fireworks in this game. And the reason why I didn't put any money on the receiving core from the Dolphins, if you look at it, those numbers are completely juiced up. Jalen Waddle's looking at minus 140. You're looking at minus 160 for Tyreek Hill. Really no value to me to be able to play those numbers unless you're going to parlay them out. And right now, there are no receiving props as we speak. So this is all receiving yards. So the yards are just really blown out of the water. But I like this game from a scoring standpoint, definitely, Joe. I would definitely take the over. And I'll be honest with you, man, I like Miami on the money line. I think this is a Miami win here. I know it sounds crazy, but listen, anything can happen on Thursday night on a short week.
Wow, so you like several Buffalo props, but you like Miami to win the game. Okay, I tend to be with you there. I'm kind of on the Dolphins. Short week usually almost always favors the home team, and I'm just more sold on the weapons Miami has. Their offensive line is suspect, but I'm more sold on their offensive weapons right now than I am on Buffalo's, despite the fact I've got Buffalo as a wild card team and the Dolphins missing the playoffs. Look, I just feel like the way it'll work out, Tony, is these teams will probably split and go home and home in terms of that season series. Let's get to your bread and butter before we wrap it up here. Some daily fantasy. We mentioned one of these guys in terms of the waiver wire before. Who are the 2 quarterbacks you think have some value this week?
Last week, we really banked in on Geno Smith, and I'm going to go back to that well again. And just to give everybody some numbers, again, look at Cincinnati. Everybody's going to say, oh, well, Cincy versus New England really had their number. Listen, Cincinnati's cooked. I'll be honest with you. If anybody listened to me on Sirius the entire offseason, I am a full fade and continue to be a full fade on anybody on the Cincinnati Bengals. I didn't like, there was a lot of bad juju on that team. I didn't like their body language, and it showed. Yeah. So Geno with 55, this is the same Geno that got 19, okay, at 5,500, and Jalen Hurts from a DFS standpoint was 7,300 and only got you 1 point more at 20. That's how you win in daily fantasy. You got to get that value. So I love Geno again this week at 5,500, and Baker 5,900 versus Detroit. Stafford threw for 317 yards. And last week, Josh Allen was 8,000 in DFS and got 32 points. Baker Mayfield was 5,600 and got 26. $2,400 less. Well, Joe, that's where you get the value out of quarterback.
That is tremendous value, and it was a tremendous week from Baker, and it's been a tremendous 7-8 weeks from Baker, going back to how he finished last season. What about on the ground? We've spent some time talking about different weapons out there in Arizona. Do you like an Arizona running back this week?
Yeah, you know, this guy constantly gets overlooked. It's James Conner for me all day. He consists, no competition for carries. He gets the rock in the red zone. He gets the rock all over. And Monty had, that's David Montgomery, that is Detroit, had a 5.4 yards per carry last week against this same team of the Rams. So I expect Conner to do some really good damage. And then how about Brian Robinson on the Commanders? And I get the Commanders are not that good, but against the New York Giants, did you see what AJ I call him, and Aaron Jones did for Minnesota? Almost 100 yards, ran all over.
Don't remind me.
I love Brian Robinson this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to go against anyone taking on my Giants at this point, Tony. Speaking of my Giants, is there value in a New York Giants receiver? Tony, you only got about 15 seconds here, but tell me what you think.
Sure, real quick. Malik Neighbors, I love it at 5,900. True number one, but the team will always be behind. And George Pickens for 5,800 versus Denver. No worries with Fields. 7 targets, 90% target to catch ratio, up from 75% last year.
I love the Pickens play, and I love that little dig you threw in there with Neighbors. The Giants will always be behind. That's why he's the best. Tony Cutillo. Follow him on Twitter at RiseWithTony. Thanks so much, my man.
You got it, man. See you next week, and have a good week, man.
Cashing Out continues after this.